Britain isn't growing. Well, not as fast as it should be by any means. Today, the typical British family is around £7,000 worse off than the typical German family. It's around £14,000 worse off than a typical American family. These are extraordinary numbers and haven't always been the case. The short-lived Liz Truss administration really got this fact. Their diagnosis was correct. However, clearly the treatment, or the proposed treatment at least, was a little bumpy. So to really solve this question of growth, cross-party solutions are necessary. Ones that can carry a coalition of support. But how might a pro-growth coalition be built? Well, a new campaign has launched this week. It's called Britain Remade. It's working to find out what is really holding Britain back and exploring how a new coalition for growth could potentially be built. Well, I'm pleased to be joined by Sam Richards, the CEO of Britain Remade, a former Downing Street advisor as well. And first of all, what is the impetus behind this new campaign launching right now?
So Britain Remade is a campaign for people who think that Britain is a great country, that we are the country who built the world's first railway, split the atom, built the world's first commercial nuclear power plant. But unfortunately, we've stopped building. It's been 27 years since we built a new nuclear power station in this country. And this failure to build new sources of clean energy, new railways, new transport links, and enough new houses is making us all poorer. Exactly as you said in your introduction. The average British family is now poorer than the average German family, poorer than the typical American family, but by the end of this decade is set to be poorer than the average Polish family on current trajectories. We don't think that this is inevitable. We think that there are policy levers that we can pull, and we think that if we deal with our broken planning system, we can build these new sources of energy, these new transport links, these new houses that will get us back on track.
Why is it that no one has really got this fact in government until this stage? We often hear about politicians saying we should build new power stations. We're boasting about how many houses have been built. But then when it comes to the particular, planning reform has been defeated twice in the last 10 years. And similarly, as you say, no new nuclear power stations for 27 years. What is holding this back at a political level?
I mean, I think governments have made steps in the right direction. And if you look at the work that the Boris Johnson government did, for example, on cutting the amount of time it takes to build new offshore wind farms, progress has been made. But it's clear from the energy bills that we're paying at the moment, from the cost of property, that progress hasn't been made. And I think what we want to do with Britain Remade is give that voice to, we think, the millions of voters who would support that pro-growth agenda.
And what evidence do you have that there is a sort of pro-growth coalition out there, to perhaps lift an opposite phrase from the former Prime Minister? The fact that perhaps there are these quiet voters who do want to see this kind of development and progress in Britain?
Well, I've spent the last 3 months talking to people across the country, talking to businesses, and there has been huge support for exactly these pro-growth policies, these supply-side policies. But it's also borne out in polling. We commissioned polling over the research over the weekend, and this research showed that a majority of voters would support new solar farms, would support new wind farms, if they benefited from cuts in bills, which they should, as the cheapest sources of power. So there is support for these pro-growth policies out there.
But crucially, we live in fractious political times. Parties are bubbling up and down. Currently, the Labour Party has a substantial lead in the polls. How important is it to create these policy proposals that all parties can support moving forward, that can sustain a coalition even if the government changes?
Yeah, it's absolutely vital. And I think what's been really interesting is over recent months you've seen almost a consensus building across politics. Yes, of course, Liz Truss's government focused on growth, as I know that Rishi's is as well. And you've seen Keir Starmer's Labour Party making clean growth a centrepiece of their agenda, and even nodding towards planning reforms in his conference speech. So you are starting to see this across the political spectrum, and it makes sense because we know that if you want to cut bills, if you want to reduce our energy dependence on imported expensive foreign gas, and if you want good jobs here in the UK, we need to start building these new industries here in Britain.
It is remarkable that so many of these solutions that you propose are literally free. They don't cost the taxpayer anything at all. In fact, all they need to do is get the government out of the way, stop inhibiting the private sector, if you will, creating that investment, that progress, that building. I suppose because it just looks so obvious in policy terms, clearly it's going to be more difficult than that. There are vested interests who do not want things being built in this country. How do you combat that sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think by making the case and by setting out clearly that these new industries, that building new wind and solar, building new nuclear, building new houses, building new roads, you can make it. It is clear now that these will cut your energy bills, that these will deliver good new jobs in this country, and that they will make us more energy independent. And I think by focusing on the clear industrial benefits from these policies, I'm hopeful that we can build a broad coalition to deliver the policies that we need to get us back on track.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing your campaign as it develops, and indeed the research that you're carrying out. Really, really fascinating stuff. Thank you there, Sam Richards, CEO of Britain Remade.